remit of this committee. So what we have here are, if you remember the May Cabinet meeting, which was the last Cabinet that had a monthly finance report, and this was about the outturns, wasn't it, of 18-19. Some of us met pre that Cabinet meeting and had a 2-hour meeting to discuss various questions, issues, comments that we wanted to put to Cabinet about finance report. It took a while, but we did get the response back from the portfolio holder, which you'll find in the information pack before you. What normally I don't want to do is just to create a sort of ping pong where we're asking questions, having them bounce back, and then we're asking supplementary questions, etc. However, I'm in committee's hands about the answers we've received here, and whether you wish to have any further discussion, or indeed if we want to put any further. We don't have Section 151 here today, of course, but if we do want to put any further questions or points of clarification from these answers, you are quite at liberty to do so. I can see Richard is raring to go.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is this more a pre-meet thing as to whether we discuss, because for me the logical answer would be to go through each area and see whether we want to call someone to actually go through their answers, which is more a pre-meet meeting than a
okay.
substantive.
Yep, no, I think that's probably a fair point. I say again, the only point of having it here today was we didn't have any opportunity other than this to discuss finance. But I mean,
because if they ask questions, we're going to have to.
Okay, I mean, if that's the mood of the meeting, I'm quite happy to sort of ignore this today, go through it next time in more detail. Oh, this is going to be a quick. Yeah, sorry, ignores the wrong word. Okay, I suggest perhaps we do that, unless, and here's your chance, you have something dying that you're desperate to raise about the commentary with the answers we've had. No,
Chairman, the only one that occurs to me that we need a bit more comfort on, I think, is probably the one is LGSS law.
So, which page, just to remind people?
7. We don't have the joint scrutiny operating at the minute. I don't think you may have some update on that. It's fine. But I know that there's a joint committee next month, but it's still something of concern. Yeah. The working group of this committee, one of the working groups is the LGSS joint committee working group thing. And we do have a meeting planned.
Sorry, I should just add that LGSS law, I'm sure members know, is a completely separate company from LGSS, so it wouldn't fall under that scrutiny.
You were at the audit committee last time, so should we maybe adding something about the audit and how the 17-18 and the preparation for the 18-19, maybe put a bit more pressure how important audit is.
I mean, the fact that the 17-18 budget hasn't yet been signed off is still with KPMG, who are still the old auditors. I mean, that is being processed through the audit committee. I mean, sorry, you're suggesting that we just push forward some sort of commentary on how important it is. Please hurry up.
Yes, I think somewhere there we don't. I think the role of audit and how proactive we should be with audit should be there outside of the audit committee. The audit committee does its job, but also for the finance, it's very important that is aligned with the audit and the recommendation that will be out of audit.
I think you would be running a risk of mission creep. Yes, I think whilst, as Councillor Irving-Swift has highlighted, there can be a crossover between audit committee and overview and scrutiny, but there are important differences between the two roles, and I think getting into a situation where the overview and scrutiny committee was commenting on something that really should be left to the audit committee to pursue, and I'm sure they are, might create a difficult precedent.
Having said that, the vice chairs and chair of this committee meet with the
That's very well.
the portfolio holders, so we can probably just mention that next time we meet. Jill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On page 34, there's a mention of the Chester Farm project. I wonder if we ought to just follow that up by asking if the going into administration of the builders of that has got any financial implication on the council.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because I would expect at the very least re-procuring that contract with a different contractor, there'll be a whole process that has to go through, and that will, I guess, cause added financial work and also potentially a delay. I was interested in Chester Farm actually because I do understand that the lottery bid money that they got for that included for things like iPads for potential visitors to walk around, and I don't think that's going to happen now. So whether the lottery might want to claw back some of their money.
Some of us attended a visit to Chester Farm about a week ago, organised by Mrs Bridges, and that was just about the day that Shay Law were announcing they were going to administration, and it was too early a stage for her to know, but it certainly meant that she was thinking that they would definitely have to re-procure, but hopefully not an overdue procurement because of the amount of work that was left. And that it would probably delay the opening of Chester Farm till spring next year, whereas they were hoping for this year. It will also mean that some of the things, such as one of the income streams would have been a cafe, so that may not be open as early to get the income stream. But certainly, we didn't go into detail about. But the education side was certainly something that was. Primary concern. There's also other bits and pieces that have been delayed. The bridge over the river has still got, which is going to be an expensive thing, still got to be funded, and probably some car parking, additional car parking needed. But it's certainly going to delay it, and certainly may introduce. And of course, they have no idea as to what the administrators of Shayla will submit as bills, and some of the contractors who were working have been refusing to work on it for several weeks because of the not being paid by Shayla. So it's still a bit unclear, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. It does, and I think also there are questions about the sort of business case, because one of the whole elements of Chester Farm was for it in the future to be self-funding, to sort of wipe its own face, or whatever the expression is. But I also understand there are difficulties with some proposals being put forward for revenue generating things like, I don't know, running craft fairs and things that are considered, well, actually that's not heritage, so we don't want to do it. And without that income, it might perhaps have impact on the business case. Jonathan.
Yeah, Chair, I don't think it's in any position to be self-funded at the moment anyway. So the fact is there was a film made about something like this called A Money Pit, and it seems like what it is. And as much as we like to see what history and heritage is, it's been buried for 2,000 years, so I think leaving it buried for a little bit longer isn't going to damage too much, I think, if we've got money that we need to be spent elsewhere. I understand that there's the Heritage Lottery Fund, that if we don't commit to a certain percentage of finishing it, they can then ask for it back, which will whatever, but we're in a precarious position with this, and we can keep throwing money over something that is never going to show a return.
I tend to agree with you, especially about the money pit comment, and there are some of us that have previously suggested that actually it needn't be finished to the high standard that they're going for, because it is seemingly throwing money after bad. James is going to tell us, well...
Through you, Chair, it sounds as if the committee is asking for some information on the current position concerning Chester Farm, because there are questions, points of speculation that have been raised. Members need to know the facts on that.
Can I suggest we discuss this then at our next pre-meeting, because this might actually become a topic in itself for the scrutiny, for us to look into more detail and get the people here in front of us who can answer those questions.
Yeah, and maybe the relevant some of the relevant information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're agreeing also on, in general, on the finance stuff, that we'll look into that in more detail. I've certainly got some questions that I would want answers to, but I don't necessarily need them to happen in this public forum.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just to clarify. So is the committee saying now that it would like to seek some further information about the latest position of Chester Farm prior to a subsequent discussion, or is it saying it wants to have a discussion which may lead to a request for further information? I don't want to be asked, I don't want to come out of this meeting asking for further information if I've gone further than you intended.
Cecile, then Jonathan.
I think following what Jill was saying, maybe at your pre-meeting you ask the question, and if you have the answer that satisfy you, we don't need a further, or if you are very happy, if the two vice chair and you are not happy, you bring it in front of us all.
Okay, I don't think we'll get the answers at the pre-meeting, which is essentially an agenda-setting meeting, but we may choose to discuss what we want to go on the future agenda. Jonathan?
I think quite the opposite, Chair. I think that we need to have some information before we have the pre-meet, so that we know what we're going to discuss. And then if there's any further questions that rise out of the information being provided to us, we can then request for clarification afterwards.
Okay, so a written briefing perhaps circulated to all members, and following on from us receiving that, we can decide at the pre-meeting whether or not there's any mileage in us taking it further. Does that make sense, James? Oh, good. Okay, and the responses to the finance questions we have here, again, we've got the opportunity to think about it a little more and feed that into, and we are certainly, well, we're going to come on to the work programme in a second, but there's going to be a proposal that the finance is on the next month. Chris?
Just a couple of brief comments on the answers we've received. So the first one, which was around the format of cabinet meetings, I can confirm that as of today, there has been no discussion with the leader of the Liberal Democrat group about the format of cabinet meetings. There may have been discussions with the group leaders, I don't know. There appeared to me at least one answer that deliberately misunderstood the question, but I can go into more detail about that one at the pre-meet. And I did note with interest the answer around the question on SIPFA and the amounts paid to them, which appeared to have been in respect of two consultants, one receiving £139,000 and one £94,000. It isn't clear from the answer whether that's two companies of consultants or two individual consultants, but I think I'd be interested to know at some point.
Okay, and again, we can follow up individual points. I really don't want to get into a ping-pong of ideas. Okay, okay. In that case, the next item, probably a little more important anyway, is the work programme, item 8 on today's agenda, page 39. There is a suggestion that the next meeting will look specifically at finance, which we have deferred from this meeting, and also from memory, the children's improvement plan. Again, details to be finalised at our agenda setting meeting, but I'm assuming that those two issues are probably regarded as important to the committee. Richard?
Yeah, I think I'd really like to get into the finances. You know, we are now nearly into July. Well, yeah, July. Yeah. And yeah, and I really feel blindsided at the moment. I'd like to know where we are, how we're going, what the projections are, and I don't know. I'm sure the delay is justified, but I'd very much like us to get into where we are, how we're doing.
I agree entirely, and I'm disappointed we're not able to have that discussion today. And I bring back again, I've mentioned it before and before, we need very much to find a mechanism, and we've got to invent this. So it's really important to have a discussion around how we can start work on next year's budget, because I do not want to end up in December having to do what we normally have to do and sort of cram 20 meetings in the space of a couple of weeks. Chris?
Just absolutely support everything that's just been said, and if you want to gain an idea of why it's important, we definitely have a look at finance in our next meeting, and it's a shame we haven't done so far. You heard from Anna today, transitions budget overspent £1.4 million, and I think I heard her say that NAS as a service is overspent by £6 million. Now, whether that's overspent to date or projecting to overspend at the end of the financial year, not absolutely clear on that, but nevertheless, there's a concern there already. And there is also a concern, I do absolutely agree, that we've been asking for information for by the time of our next meeting, it will be since the 24th of April, around the thing you mentioned at the beginning of your comments, Chair, about the financial planning process at the County Council, which the Section 151 officer, the Chief Finance Officer, came to us and said, OK, I can't provide it now because I'm still working that up and recommending it to colleagues, but surely that is in place by now. I cannot believe that it is not in place, and we need to know what it is to inform what it is that we're going to do.
I'm quite happy for the minutes of this meeting to reflect that there is concern from the committee about all of these issues around finances that we have been discussing. I say again, I am disappointed we've not been able to do that today. Graham, then Cecile.
Thank you, Chairman. Building on what Councillor Stanbridge just said, one of the things about getting in early, if you like, is that we have the opportunity to look at things that are not going to change, because this is what happens every year. We get a list of things that are being amended in one way, shape or form, and there's a much longer list of things that are hidden away and we don't look at because they're not being offered as changes, and starting early is the only way that we'll pick up things that we might want to look at that are not by officers' means recommended for any sort of change.
Totally agree, and one would expect that officers already have some ideas around that. Cecile.
Yes, going back on to what Chris was saying, Anna reported 6 million today and not in the future, is what she said. They had a very bad April and May. And because she cannot say that I am going to have 6 million at the end of the year. So that was my understanding. So we might have for clarification.
Yeah, I think we do need clarification because it could potentially be either of those. She did also say it was being mitigated by savings elsewhere, but again, we need to have an understanding of that. Yeah. Jill.
Yeah, I'd back up what Graham just said. We asked for the last 2 years for items that have not changed. We've never seen a list of those. So it would give us some idea by having that sort of information, whether they may change next year or they may not, but we could have some input into that perhaps and say that's an expenditure we don't think is valid, or we think more should be put into something.
I think all of these are really valid and important points, and I don't want to mention the unitary word again, but clearly as a committee, as we move forward over the next year or two, we all need to have an understanding of how that's going to fit into future working arrangements as well, and we will only do that by having an in-depth knowledge of what the current position is. So, Julie.
Yeah, I've mentioned it to you before that, I mean, it's 4 months into this financial year, but obviously when we started, we had a lot of talks with portfolio holders and directors telling us how much they were going to save, like procurement, the contracts and all different things. And I haven't seen where they're telling us that these savings are there, because obviously that's going to impact the rest of the budget.
We spent a lot of time in sort of December, January looking at the budget proposals. We need to monitor them and find out if they are going according to plan. I think there's agreement that, okay, so that it is within our remit, it is a priority for us. We will be putting that on next agenda, unless Richard says different.
No, I think you're right, but it's also it's self-preservation as well. In any sort of post-budget investigation into this year's budgets, they will ask the question, what was Scrutiny doing? And I do not want to be accused of saying, well, what, you didn't look anything into it after 4 months, you had nothing. You know, and what was the accusation of the previous scrutiny? That it was ineffective, and that's not fair. You know, we need to grip this up and we need to make it very clear, because it's unfair then that if anything goes wrong, that we should be actually culpable for any mismanagement here.
I totally agree, and again I'm disappointed we're not able to do it today. You will remember that we actually delayed looking at the finances at the advice of the portfolio holder for the start of the year because he was saying it was too early. That's why we'd hoped to do it today, and now we're putting it back another month. We will do it as soon as we can. Jonathan.
Yes, Chair. I think we had confirmation, and I think maybe Suzanne can confirm or deny this. At one of our last meetings, we discussed this and saying about having the should we just say the appropriate representation of the portfolios or whatever to come to us and give our explanations that we require as the Overview Scrutiny Committee. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the power to make them come to us. And I think it's about time we started exercising that power.
The problem here is having an understanding of how we fit into the council's timetable. We were told quite categorically that Section 151 answer could not come and answer those questions because he hadn't effectively asked them, gone to Cabinet yet. Whether that's appropriate, that's something we need to understand and possibly take a more robust view on.
Absolutely, Chair, but we're talking about more than one department here. With the children's as well. We've been asking for information coming from them, and it's not coming. The list is ongoing, and if we're not careful, I think we can be bogged down with waiting for people to turn up to explain things to us so that we can delve in our job of overview and scrutiny. And then, like I said, everything then's just going to come up, and then we're going to be log jammed because we're going to run out of time to do everything. And then something will slip, and as Richard says, we're then going to be held. They aren't going to be worried about them not coming to us. People will say, well, why haven't you done this? And
you will remember at the last full council, on behalf of you guys, I put forward the scrutiny report, which was making some of those very points. I've got Cecile, but I just want to bring the monitoring officer in.
Forgive me, I just had to quickly look up the exact wordings of the provision in the terms of reference before I replied to that question. So in our constitution it says that in carrying out its functions, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee may request the attendance of any councillor or officer, including those appointed by LGS Joint Committee, and so on. If the request is declined, the committee may require any member of the Cabinet, head of service or chief officer, and so on. Later on they say, where any councillor or officer is required to attend overview and scrutiny under this provision, the chair of that committee will inform the monitoring officer. So I don't think it goes any further than a request at the moment, but I think that the chair can make that request very strongly.
If I may, Chair, correct. I think I remember that then. But then we also had a proviso on the end of that if the officers or the councillors don't attend, we can continually to make the request that either the CEO attends or the leader attends. And as you quite rightly said, Cheryl, somebody mentioned that if we keep asking them to turn up, they're soon going to get racked off of us asking them and then make the appropriate person turn up.
We will definitely be discussing finance at the next meeting. If portfolio holders choose not to come, well, more fool them. I think they look very foolish. I'm sure that they will be doing. We are all trying to work constructively together at the end of the day.
Sorry, there is a provision to ask the monitoring officer to require that person to attend by giving them 10 working days' notice.
Consider it done.
May I suggest we make that applications now?
Okay.
Very powerful, Susan.
And the point about receiving timely information to other things we've asked for, and indeed to reports going to Cabinet, brings us very nicely on to the next thing we need to discuss. On page 45, you'll see the summary of responses. We have been waiting, you'll remember, for responses to a couple of reports that we put into Cabinet, including early years payments, including the report we did on recruitment and retention of social workers, and you'll find the Cabinet responses in these pages. Any comments? I mean, you'll see some things.
to talk about the working groups or just the work programme?
The working groups, well, we're coming on to this, at the end of this, there's the, we're going to have a discussion on the working group we've set up with highways.
Yeah, I was just only going to say I thought I'd expressed an interest to be on that, but I'm a bit conscious it's quite well in the Conservative head that it. But anyway, that's I had expressed an interest to be on that.
Okay, well, I'm sure that'll be fine, but we'll come on to the highways working group in a second. I just want to finish off. We've agreed, I think, for the next meeting on the work programme that we'll look at Children's Improvement Plan and Finance, and then the next thing is the... have I gone into a different agenda? I might have done.
No, Chair, it's all the same agenda.
Okay, okay. So, okay, but I'm doing it page by page, I suppose. So, responses from Cabinet on, as I say, for example, the social work and the early years thing. It seems that they have, they've agreed to some things we've suggested. They've put question marks on others. I don't know if anybody has any further comment, and at the end of the day all we can do is make our recommendations to them. We can't force them to do what we suggest, but we hope that they will take on board our suggestions. Richard?
Yeah, I was just wondering, have we got sources whereby we can just monitor this? So we got the relative feedback from a small group of them that were working together, that like a pressure group that would keep us informed on what's happening operationally, whether the money is coming.
Oh, the private, are we on the early years now?
Yeah.
I've no idea. But I would suspect that Councillor Perry has contacts and access to that. That might be a specific question we can ask her when we next year.
I'd just like to have a bit more clarification on, we understand where the position is with engaging new social workers and take on board that obviously the market's saturated and it's difficult to attract social workers to come to should we just say, an organisation that's having a few difficulties in certain areas. However, we seem to be lacking the information on when we said about a bespoke administration team to assist in the work of social workers and letting the social workers that we have freeing up their time to do more social workers work. I would personally like to see some more information on that, if we can, please, because I do feel that that is a strong element where we can actually then improve the social working.
Sorry, this was part of your recommendations.
It is, Chair. They seem to be fixed on the recruitment part of the paper that we submitted, but the administration authorities, we thought that was a crucial part of the paper, which will then free up the social workers' time.
I mean, I think through you, Chair, this is something that can be picked up through the work programme in various different ways. So there is the regular information stream that is provided to Councillor Perry, who the committee has given a sort of a deputised role of keeping an oversight of children's services issues between meetings. Some of that will be an indication of pressures, how well facing children's services, how well the service is performing. The committee, coming out of the last discussion it had on this, asked for various specific information, which is that provided on page 53, reference F there, which has been circulated to members on the 20th of June. So again, similarly to other discussions at the current meeting, if there is something that the committee thinks it needs to know more about, whether that is a completely new topic or whether progress or whether an aspect or progress with the topic it's looked at previously, then it can ask for further information on that. And based on the work that the committee has done over the past year, children's services is likely to continue to be a recurring topic. Well, you've just agreed that it will come back to the improvement plan will come back to the next meeting. So that provides a means for focusing in on some of the issues arising from the scrutiny review. it's not a one-shot deal. You don't do the work and then file it away and never think about it, never return to it again. It's about taking a balanced view about do we need to have a check back on a piece of work we've previously done.
And I guess the Children's Improvement Plan, which we will be looking at in more detail at the next meeting, will include some elements of that anyway. So perhaps at the pre-meeting we can discuss what specific questions and monitoring updates we want as part of that. Anyway, we are, I mean, James is absolutely right. Children's Services is going to be something that we're looking at again and again over the next, well, year or two. We did suggest that we would discuss today whether this committee wanted specifically to look at anything that came out of the 2 serious case reviews, which were obviously 2 very extremely tragic events that happened in Northamptonshire. I'm not entirely, I mean, our work in children's anyway, I think will probably pick up some of the questions that came out of there. Richard.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the serious case review, it may well not be that the processes were flawed, it was just that they weren't executed very well. So it would be interesting to see what specifically comes out with regard to the serious case review. I think we've got to making sure that whatever did go wrong has been put right as a separate issue to the overall improvement. Does that make any sense? So there may be some very bespoke things about, well, actually the system was right, it was just poorly executed. So we need to get...
I think it's part of our overall looking at children's services, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, we need to ask those specific questions.
But I would say it's critical. Yeah, that is a critical piece of work because that is something that has happened, gone wrong, and had absolutely terrible consequences. So if we were prioritising anything children's services, it was to ensure that everybody is safe based on what came out of the review, and then the longer term stuff is the general improvement in children's services. Is that a fair comment?
It does. I mean, that's why we said we'd discuss it today to see if there was anything specific that came out of there. James, you wanted to comment on whether this committee can be of any use in that regard?
Well, I think a key point that I think I'd like to highlight, Chair, is not seeking to gainsay Councillor Auger's points about the importance of having confidence in the situation now and the way things are being done, but the fact that overview and scrutiny and this committee is only one of a number of scrutiny in inverted commas bodies or that would be wanting to know that, and it's important for the committee to think about how it fits into that overall picture, and certainly not that it doesn't end up in a situation where it's trying to do something that another body, another authority might be better equipped or more within their remit than this committee would be in its to do. I mean, that can be as simple as a matter as you can be sure that the Council's Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education will want to have answers to exactly the same questions that Councillor Auger has just raised. So in that sense, she is also acting as a scrutineer.
So I think that's really good counsel. If there, with regard to the overall scrutiny of that, I think it needs to be above and beyond the Cabinet Member. So it needs to be like a third eye. If there is another body that takes primacy, I think we're not going to double up the work. So if there is somebody that's primarily being that third eye on the improvement, then I think then that for me would satisfy that, because we don't want to...
Yeah, and I mean, there's the Children's Safeguarding Board, of course, although that's changing, isn't it, I believe, James?
Just as a further point, I think I'm right in saying that the Cabinet Member for Children's, Families and Education has statutory responsibilities in that role relating to children's safeguarding. So the third eye role that Councillor Auger mentioned may be a case of the Scrutiny Committee in the first instance asking the cabinet member what they are doing to fulfil their role. So it is looking at the response to the serious case review, but indirectly rather than directly.
Okay.
And that would be reflecting where the committee sits in the overall network of accountability, if I could use that term.
Well, according to the discussion we've just had, we are going to have both the portfolio holder and the Director of Children's here at the next meeting, so it might be prudent to, before we get into the Children's Improvement Plan overall, to have a brief discussion and question session about these two tragic cases. Julie, can you use your mic, please?
Are we on agenda item 8? Oh, sorry. Are we on agenda item? Because I thought we were still on that, are we?
We are, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Okay. No, because it went from. Because I just wanted to say.
Page 41.
Yeah, with what I agree with what Richard is saying, because I thought that you wanted comments as to their actions from our recommendations.
Yeah, we've slightly digressed, but yes, absolutely.
No, that's okay. I just because what was said was about the social workers, and they're trying to recruit, and it was said that we were told that they were going to recruit social workers, not high level, which they're having problems, being able to recruit, but social workers or workers that were either going to be just doing the court work or be in transportation for children, to free up the more experienced social workers. And I didn't know whether we could just ask for some clarification if that was being done.
That was one of the recommendations from the report, wasn't it?
Yes.
Sorry. It was, Chair, but, and that's where I specifically want to drill down to, because although a lot of the answers here are geared around the recruitment of social workers and the inability to recruit social workers, there's very little reference, if any reference, to one of the recommendations we said about the administration team. I know it seems I'm going on about this, but it did take part of the actual the working group's work. When we had the open day, where we spoke to both social workers and social workers management, there was comments made on more than one occasion, is that there was reluctance for any of them to visit us because they've heard it all before and nothing will be done. And at that time we gave reassurance that this time something will be done because we've got a different kind of structure in there to enable it. However, it does seem at this moment in time that their comments are ringing true. That we're 12 months gone now since we started this work, and it does seems, I'm not saying it is, that very little has been done to alleviate the issue of recruitment and retention of social workers. And part of the work did involve their request. It wasn't just us saying it on the working group, is that they were saying that it would help them immensely if they had a bespoke team behind them that can take away of the, dare I say, the repetitive day-to-day work on phone calls, making appointments, doing escorts, sitting there. If someone's have to have an assisted meeting with their children or someone that has to stand there in attendance with them, that they didn't actually have to be a high-powered or high-paid social worker to do that, and anybody could have done that with the appropriate DBS checks and stuff. And this is also in attendance at court as well on things. And that, Chair, is what I'm trying to say, is that it seems to be forgotten about and nothing else. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that's where we need to drill down, and that, of course, then will help if we go with that package to say to social workers that you're not going to be expected to do this, this and this because we've got a team to do that. It may make it more attractive for them to come to work for us.
Okay. So the report that we put to Cabinet, which we've had the response on, was actually based around the fact that we were disappointed that things weren't yet happening. As
Chairman, we have had the response. I've been trying to say it for a long while.
Yeah.
We have had that response on the 20th of June. I've just
yes,
got it in front
I
of me.
think Jonathan is, unless I'm misunderstanding, I think he's suggesting, as author of the original report, that the response hasn't answered all of the points in that report. Is that?
I think the question was about the administration team and this was something I was very keen that we do, as I was on that working party as well. Email from Ben, 20th of June. The number of business support staff that have been recruited to support children's social care. The service is actively recruiting to 32 vacancies to support social worker teams and have so far recruited 8 additional staff and expect all posts to be filled by the 31st of August.
Oh, okay, so that's
I think that it's not it. I think it would have been probably, if that was in this report, then that would have solved that query. But I think, you know, that I was pleased. I was actually quite surprised. 32. You know, I didn't realise it would be that many.
Okay, I'm assuming you haven't seen that response either. Okay, can I suggest maybe the easiest thing is you, as the original author of the report, possibly get together with Councillor Perry and just go through what's been given to us, just to see if there are still any gaps or concerns in the response, and from there follow up with any supplementary questions that you may have.
I think what we'll do, Chair, if for yourself, if we can, is that we'll arrange a meeting with the portfolio holder and get an up-to-date brief.
Sounds like a plan. We don't need to do it in this public forum. Jill.
I think it might have got sort of hidden away because it was at the bottom of another email about the number of agency workers and a chart, and that might have looked like that was a substantive answer there, and that was tucked at the bottom. So that's probably why it got overlooked.
So I think that's a plan. Talk to Victoria Perry, and if need be, yes, arrange a meeting just with the portfolio holder, just to reassure that on behalf of the committee that the response is full and accurate, and you know.
It is, Chair, and it's also to reassure not only the social workers that we are listening to them and want to help them and actively help them with what they're requesting for us to do, but also to reassure the public that we are working at it and we are trying to improve the services that we give to them.
Absolutely, which is the most important thing. And I think we're agreed, aren't we, on the 2 serious case reviews? We will specifically, when we've got the portfolio holder and director here, we'll ask them some questions just to ensure for ourselves that they're doing everything that they need to do in response to that. And then we'll get on and discuss the children's improvement plan. Okay. Does that? Yeah. Does that all make sense, James?
It does.
Oh, really? Okay, good. In that case, I think we come on to the working group, which was, we have at the back of today's report, this is it, page 57, sort of terms and reference for the working group that we agreed to set up. We suggested, didn't we, that Jonathan was going to chair this group? Did we have membership of the group arranged, which Graham was talking about a second ago?
It's on page 58.
We had some
part membership.
Ah, right, okay.
We had some expressions of interest already, Chair, but that doesn't preclude others. You don't want the group getting too big, but it can be more than 3.
Okay.
And I think, Chair, there's no preclusion that, as Graham did say, that there's 2 members already from, dare I say, the divisions of Wellingborough being represented. I don't think that really makes much difference.
No, neither do I. I think we need the best people to do the job.
It would be helpful, and I dare say, because I know this is not politically sort of balanced as such, and it's not relevant to that, but it would be nice to have a sort of like a bit of a mixture, shall we say, because obviously different people talk to different people, shall we say.
Okay. Well, can I, unless there's anybody else that wants to put themselves forward now, can I perhaps just leave you to arrange the membership of that group?
If that's acceptable to you, Chair, and everybody else, then we can do
it. It is to me. Julie?
Sorry, is that the highway?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to be on.
Great. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, you're on.
So Graham and Julie as well, yeah?
So that's Jonathan, Jill, Malcolm, Graham and Julie. You've got 5.
That's fine.
Okay. And of course. And apart from that, you happy with all the purpose, the terms and conditions? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jill.
It seemed it's quite a big piece of work, and it's very specific about we will have 3 meetings. I just, you know, when you actually get into it, it might, you know, need an extra meeting.
I think we need to give the group the flexibility to do what they need to do.
Yeah, if you find you need longer, I think that should be possible.
Okay, good point, but we can do that.
Chair, if I may ask a request as well, if the committees and yourself are so willing, on the recruitment and retention we did have a member of the public join us and give us some information. I'd like to request, if possible, could we use the same sort of scenario again if there is somebody that can give us the knowledge and the expertise that we require?
I feel I just need to mention to members that there is some legal proceedings on the go at the moment from Mr. Gaster, and I really would think it's inappropriate at the moment to have him in.
I wasn't thinking of Mr. Gaster.
Is the committee agreed that the group has that flexibility to co-opt somebody on as they seem fit? And it may not be to every meeting. I don't know. I'll leave it entirely up to you, Chris.
Absolutely agreed about the co-option thing. I just wanted to be sure that we're all pretty clear that this group will aim to bring its report back as outlined in the programme, which I think is on our meeting at the end of August. Because clearly, whilst this group is working, I know it's a tight timetable on a big subject, but while this group is working, we won't be able to set up any other working groups unless we disband the LGSS working group, which I'm sure we don't want to do. So that deadline has to be pretty much cast in stone. Thank you.
I think it's a valid point, and I'm sure the group will try to do that. Cecile.
Yes, and following what the monitoring officer has just said, if you want to interview people and so on, you might want to check with the monitoring officer beforehand if there is ongoing legal issue that could entangle us even more.
Flexibility to do what you want apart from break the law.
Chair, through you, just on the point about the length of the piece of work, I was also conscious that it was a tight timescale when putting this, which is why I think I would also emphasise the point is likely to require a minimum of 3 working group meetings. I think we would clearly be looking to get this underway as soon as possible, but that would be ahead of the next meeting of this committee at the back end of July. If, as a result of its preliminary work, the working group identified that this timetable was optimistic, then I would see it as entirely logical for them to come back to the main committee and say, in order to do justice to the task you've given us, the scope, the timetable needs to change. So we need a decision from the committee either to fit the scope to the timing or extend the timing to fit the scope. That would be a sensible approach.
Okay.
Work in progress, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there
Ben's going to be busy.
anything else? I've got no matters of urgent business unless there's any from the floor. Chris.
Just on the work programme, I just wanted to put in an early bid for what we might be looking at in our August meeting. Hopefully by that we can have a look at the transformation programme then, because it'll have done its first quarter, they'll have worked out how it's doing. We've accepted that it's something we should look at, so I would hope that in our August meeting we would be prepared to invite Paul Helsby and his team to come along for that. And perhaps if we're going, just on the budget theme, perhaps, and very much on the theme around looking at the things that won't change, if it's not possible yet to advise us of the things that might be changing in the budget, maybe we can start challenging some of the things where things aren't going to change, so that we can make points around those, agree or disagree as appropriate in our August meeting. I appreciate, maybe that one we can leave till our agenda setting meeting, but I'm just putting in an early bid.
Okay, I'm happy. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that would obviously, nothing comes out of next month that puts the whole of the budget in jeopardy, i.e. a department is going to be 10 billion overspent, and we'd have to call
I think
that out.
the transformation, I mean, definitely agree with you. I mean, clearly,
got 10 billion.
That's why it'd be so important to have a meeting, wouldn't it?
Clearly, any further discussion about finance will be informed and led from the meeting we're having next month.
So that's transformation.
Yes.
No problem. Like 10 billion in the bank.
Anybody want to raise anything else because other than that, I'm going to go home. Julie?
Yes, you won't want to hear this word again, or a few words. Retrospective purchase orders. Bill Jessup, the independent chair of the audit, has contacted me and said that he's going to try and get that info. Just
Yeah, appreciate the update, and we did, didn't we, write to audit, I think, or comment that could they look at this? So good to know that's happening.
they're not going to look at it, but they're waiting for the auditors. They're going to contact the auditors to get them to give an early update.
They have the audit committee have oversight because they deal with the auditors. Good update. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.